Good news, everyone! I mean, I felt like I wanted to say that, but it didn't really feel the way I wanted it to when I said it. So let's take it back a couple days. It's now Thursday. Let's take it back to Tuesday. So we woke up, or at least I did, to news on YouTube, that's where I found it, that Logic Pro and Final Cut Pro are now coming to the iPad. For a long time, a lot of people have been wanting these apps, these pro apps, to come to the iPad because iPads are being pushed as being pro devices and laptop replacements, and Apple's really been gunning for that laptop replacement with the iPads, and it's the computer that's not a computer. I've mentioned it many times before, but now that these apps are finally available on the iPad, you can actually use it for more of a professional workflow, I guess. And so many people are super excited. I know I am. I'm super excited for these apps to come to the iPad. I can't use Final Cut on my iPad because it's not an M1 iPad, but what do you do? But I think it's amazing how they're finally bringing it across, and it's taken some time, and a lot of people have been really wanting them to bring it across for a long time, but good things take time. Finally, these good things are now available to all of us. And so I really think that this is sort of like a turning point now, that they've finally done this and put these apps on the iPad, and I'll tell you why. Now, for the longest time, the iPads have been getting new chips, the M1 chips, now the M2 in the iPad Pro, the latest ones. And these chips, when you look at iPad OS and what the iPads have been able to do, these chips are way overkill. None of these iPads need this processing power, and you can barely scratch the surface of using that processing power given the fact that, well, you don't really have these pro apps. But now, if we look at Final Cut Pro, for example, that requires having the M1 or M2 chips inside the iPads. Even Stage Manager, when we look at that feature that came out with the last iPad OS update, that requires either the iPad Pros with the A12X and A12Z or the M1 or M2 iPads. Now, with the exception of the A12X and Z, the M1 or M2 iPads will require to even use that feature because there's a lot more RAM juggling and a lot more things that are going on all at once that those processors are needing. But now that's one feature that came out that, as I said, I don't have an M1 iPad, so I can't use Stage Manager on this. I only have it on my Mac. But now that, okay, there's one feature that is coming out that's using that extra processing power. Okay, now probably less than a year later, we're having these pro apps come out. And now Logic will work on older devices, just so you know. So I have the iPad Air 4, 4th generation, so this will be able to run Logic. Now, will you be able to do these crazy big and really complex music projects on them, on these older iPads on Logic? Probably not, because there is a lack of processing power, and as soon as you start to add more tracks and things like that, it doesn't work very well. It crashes, it starts to slow down. For example, DaVinci Resolve has been put on the iPad, and it is available on all the iPads with, I can't really remember, it's iPad OS 16 or 15 or something like that, and obviously certain chips won't be able to if they're too old, but my iPad runs it. But when I say my iPad runs it, I mean it can open it and start a project, but I'll probably get 5 minutes into editing a video on DaVinci Resolve, and on my iPad it's just too stuttery. So with these apps coming to the older iPads, or rather Logic coming to the older iPads, it would be a very baseline experience for having an enjoyable experience, a smooth experience on the older iPads. But really, if you want to get the most out of Logic, you need an M1 iPad. And I assume, I could be very wrong, they could optimize it perfectly and it works perfectly on all these older devices, because obviously Logic is an audio app, Final Cut is a visual app, and that requires a lot more processing power. So there is a difference, understandable, but there will be a definite difference between the M1 Logic Pro and the older iPad's version of Logic Pro, and how much it's going to be able to handle. But really, these apps, a lot of people depend on them. I know for me, I use Logic Pro a lot. And I haven't used Final Cut Pro on my Mac because it is so expensive just to buy outright. But now, the good thing about these apps coming to the iPad, they are now a subscription service, and a lot of people can be a little bit iffy on subscriptions. I know I am, I don't really like them. But this subscription's a little bit different and I'm okay with it because it's like $5 a month in the US, and here in Canada it's only $7 a month. And I'm like, if you use this professionally or on a, like, you know, you video edit on a regular basis, $7 a month, that's pretty good instead of paying like $300 outright. And I believe in the States it's also $50 a year, like $49 or something for the whole year. I'd say that's pretty good, especially if you're getting a lot of use out of it, right? So I think that the subscription service is actually very good for these apps, and you can cancel it whenever you don't use it, or if you have a big project, you can have it, use it, and then the next month you sort of have a vacation or something similar, you can just cancel it. You don't have to pay for that much. You just renew it when you get back from your vacation or something. Like, it's a cool idea to be able to have that, and I'm happy with paying the $7 to $5 a month, depending on where you are, to be able to use it. And it is very interesting to note you get a 1 month free trial for both of these apps that are coming out, and that's really cool. You can get the feel for it, see how it runs. Like for me, if I'm not able to get my hands on an M1 iPad in time, I can try Logic for free for a month. I don't have to pay for it, and I can see how it runs on these old iPads, and you definitely know I'm going to be doing a video on that, so stay tuned. Now that these are on the iPad, there are some interesting new features, especially with Final Cut Pro. They have the little spinny wheel that you see on some keyboards. They have a little turn wheel so you can sort of scroll through your timeline and everything, but they have that on the iPad, and that's something the Mac version doesn't have. Now they have made it that they talk to each other. The Mac version and the iPad version, they talk very well. You can export things from the iPad to the Mac version, not vice versa, but you can export from the iPad to the Mac. They're not making it of like, oh, you don't need the Mac version anymore, you just use the iPad version. You can use both. Hello? But I do think it's very interesting that, like, the iPad version, they would have to make changes to make the workflow a lot easier and better, and so I'm so glad that they've added these cool little features and just to make it easier and more enjoyable. And I really think that, like, finally we're getting to the point that maybe we're going to start to see even more changes with iPadOS now that we're getting things like this that are using the more higher processing power of the M1 and M2 chips. And now we're going to be able to see more things happen with iPadOS to just make use of that processing power, because really, I don't know a single person who has an M1 iPad who's actually used like most of the processing power that thing has. Now, let me know in the comments what you guys think of these apps coming to the iPad, because for me, I know that I'm going to be using my iPad for a lot more stuff now when I get my hands on one that can run these apps, because the reason I bought a MacBook like years ago was because of Logic, because I like to make music. I bought the MacBook, I bought Logic, I had it on there. You couldn't get it on the iPad. Now you can get it on the iPad, and it's a lot cheaper than just buying it outright. So I don't know, maybe I'll try switching for a little while to see if I can get away with just using an iPad. Maybe I'll switch altogether, maybe I still won't. We'll see, but I'm really interested to see how this year plays out with the iPad because of these apps coming out, making it easier for people to just use an iPad for professional things. And you know, WWDC is coming out, well, not coming out, but it's streaming next month, and usually there's a lot of software things that happen, Worldwide Developers Conference. There's also some new hardware that usually gets announced, and so just to see maybe what they do with the next iPadOS update and the new iOS update, maybe with iPadOS, maybe they'll give us some really cool new features in the operating system. So we'll have to wait to see about that, but May 23rd, I believe, is when these apps come out. I'm going to be doing a video on them to tell you how they're doing and how I can use, well, with my current iPad, how Logic works and everything. So if you do have an older iPad, maybe you could at least use that if you like to do music, but stay tuned for that. But thank you so much for watching, guys. I'm super excited to see where the iPad goes and where these apps go, and it's awesome to see that stuff is finally falling into place for the iPad, and it's really the iPad looks like it's got a little bit more of a brighter future now that we're seeing these things come across. But thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for a few videos soon. I know it's been a while since I've posted, but looking forward to posting a little bit more. But we'll see you in the next video.